Welcome back to the Realm of Popular Opinions. Today I was hoping to do a little writing update. Now I've attempted to do this video 2 times by now because I was going to film myself writing and show you a routine, but that never works. So I just scrapped both of those video ideas, and today I thought I would take you through what I've done so far and what I still plan to do, because if anyone else is an aspiring author or ever has been an aspiring author, you will know that there are many stages which drive you insane, no matter how much you love the process of writing. So I thought that today we could go through several things, such as drafts, errors, and how to go about writing scenes and dialogue individually. Now, this will not be an advice video because I generally don't really like those. A lot of creative processes are not made based on templates. They're made based on your own knowledge of things. So I don't believe in creative advice necessarily. So this will just be my own point of view, as one might say. Some basic information about my project first. Now, you will obviously never know the names of anything or the entire plot because I will publish it under a pseudonym. So, I have 2 books in progress, but I'm primarily focusing on the one that I want to publish first now, and that is a high fantasy, probably young adult. I'm not going to go out on the limb and say that it's going to be adult because I don't think so. It's definitely going to be categorized as young adult. So young adult high fantasy. I cannot write in a world that I haven't completely made up myself and can manipulate the rules as I see fit. So I already have a map, I have places, I have important cities, I have, what do you call it, topography, and several other important things. And I am currently in the middle of draft 2. Now, I started this book in 2021 when I had a bit of time off uni when I was changing courses, and I finished the entire first draft in a year, exactly in a year. And I have it sitting at around 166,000 words. Now, I don't necessarily plan on cutting that down. As I said, I don't necessarily plan on cutting it down. I just hope to make it as good as I want it to be, because I didn't think this project would be a complete one. At first I was just writing for the hell of it, but then it all came to a head in my brain and that was it. The story was complete. Now currently I am planning it to be 2 trilogies. That obviously that could definitely change. The most important thing is that I have the main skeleton of the first book. It's done. It is divided into 3 parts. Part 1 is the most problematic because I didn't really know throughout the entirety of part 1 whether I wanted it to be a whole book or not. Parts 2 and 3 need less editing, respectively. So I'm currently almost done with rewriting and repositioning part 1. So I'm almost done. I'm cutting out cringy lines. I'm cutting out dialogue that serves no purpose, scenes that are entirely pointless that I don't even know why I wrote. I am working through part 1. Now, the beginning needed to be rewritten, a lot of it, but the rest I'm more so cutting out and adding in rather than completely rewriting because the skeleton is there. Most of part 1 actually needs to happen, so I'm still keeping it as is with many changes. Now, obviously I haven't gotten to part 2 and 3 yet, so I can't comment on them, but I have read through the entire book multiple times since I finished it and edited out certain sentences and lines and things that I found inappropriate for how I want it to be. So 2 and 3 will need a lot less rewriting, if any, but they will definitely need to be edited and restructured in a way that it better fits with what I did with part 1, because in 2 and 3 I also added another character perspective, which arguably my favorite character that I've ever written is that other point of view. But that is it about drafting. I'm currently in the middle of draft 2. I don't know how many more drafts there will be, but I'm very happy with part 1 as it is right now, because I think even stuff that will need to be edited out is minor stuff. Because now I've gotten it to a place where I think everything is actually important to the plot, or if not the plot, then important to the characters. So I think that's it about that's it on drafting, because I have nothing else to say, but I really wanted to walk you through how the story developed and maybe just a bit of advice. The other book, that's not this one, I didn't write chronologically. I had like one document that was the beginning and another document that was just random scenes, not even from book 1 necessarily. This I wrote chronologically. Like this draft that I finished in a year was done chronologically. I just wouldn't write something that is supposed to happen after what had to happen first. So it was done entirely chronologically, all 166,000 words. And it is immensely useful because you can build up based on what you already did instead of having to remember what you have to add in later. So maybe just a bit of advice: if you're not very meticulous about stuff you need to remember and you have other things to do, like I did, I'm in university, maybe people work, you should write chronologically. It helps immensely. You can cut things out and edit them very easily, but you can miss something very important if writing is not the only thing you do and you don't write chronologically. The next thing that I do want to talk about is characters. Obviously, the main thread of every story is the characters, because I think most of us will agree we can put up with bad writing and bad world building if the characters are phenomenal. So the thing that I have to say about characters is, obviously you're going to need someone else to read it because they are very near and dear to you, and you know everything that's going to happen to them, presumably. Everything that's going to happen to them until the end of your story. So you can't really judge whether you did them justice in the first book because you know everything about them. So for example, my parents are my like beta readers because, and I'm a beta reader for my mother too, because both of us write, and then my dad is in a job that basically forces him to do exactly what we need him to do to our books. So we're all like beta readers to each other. I already had my dad read my book before draft 2. I don't think my mother read it once yet. So the thing about other people is they can tell you, for example, this character would never react this way. It's a little bit out of character and it seems like it's a bit rash, even though they usually behave very composed. And you can say, but it's very in character because in book 2, it's going to prove that he is actually a little bit irrational. But obviously that point doesn't stand because it didn't translate to the book, to someone who knows nothing of what's inside your head. So the biggest thing about characters that I think is my biggest fear about characters, and anyone who's a reader and an author at the same time, I am so scared that the characters I want to be likable and no one likes. I think it's a universal problem that many main characters are unlikable without the author having intended them to be. There are many obviously very liked protagonists, but it's not often the case. And I'm very frightened that because the main character is usually the one who's still learning things, that they're going to come off as unlikable. But I am also ready to admit that my side characters are infinitely more interesting. Now, this won't be any details, but I need it as an example. So the 2 points of view that I have is a character who's young and learning things in this new magical world. And the other character is arguably the most powerful magic user in the world, as I wanted her to be, because I wanted that contrast between perspectives, to see someone who's learning things for the first time and is inexperienced, and someone who has practically learned everything that there is and is unbeatable in their specific magical field. So it's fascinating to write, but I know and I predict that the more experienced one will be more interesting to readers. I gave her perspective to my mother, And she told me that I should have written the entire book about her. Now, the thing that I need to say about this, and that happens when you read books too, oftentimes the characters that are most interesting to you as a reader are most interesting to you because they are side characters. Not a lot of them would actually work as protagonists, because if you have someone who knows everything, it's very difficult to craft an interesting story. And they work only in snippets because you see their genius and their expertise and their immaculate ability. And because of this, they do not work. They do not work as carriers of your story, or at least most of the time. Off the top of my head, I can't think of an example where the main character is the one who's overpowered, because I think that's very dull. Now, I do predict everyone will say that the other character is more interesting, but I think if we step back for a second, we can acknowledge the fact that they just wouldn't work if they weren't a side character. She does get her own point of view though, so she is also arguably another main character, and I would agree with that because she is my favorite, but the main character gets a lot more page time, so think of that what you will. And I don't have any advice here. I just wanted to walk you through the perspectives that I'm writing and the struggles with both of them, because oftentimes for the main character, who is inexperienced and learning, the problem that I come across is me not wanting her to be stupid, even when it might be realistic that she should be. I don't like naive, stupid characters who don't discuss anything or think things through. So I struggle with writing her like that, and I don't necessarily have to, but sometimes I feel like she should be a bit more naive than I'm writing her to be. Obviously, beta readers will talk me through what I was intending to do, but I have a bit of trouble with making protagonists who are clueless because it irritates me. So I might be I might be skirting an edge that's a little bit dangerous and just making her unrealistically perceptible. I am fairly certain that the last thing I said was not a word. Perceiving? I'm not sure what I'm not sure what I meant. It's very clear I'm an author because I'm way more articulate on paper than like this, but that's besides the point. Another thing I would like to discuss is the world building. Now, I do not want to be the likes of Robert Jordan and Tolkien, because they spend their entire lives crafting these worlds, and I am just not someone who has an interest in creatively being so immersed. So another piece of advice here is everything that you put down on page is what's important, and if someone wants more, that's not necessarily your fault, because there are many worlds where I'm like, this is very cool, very well crafted, but I wish I got more XYZ. The author didn't necessarily have to put it in. That's just my perception as a reader, that I really wanted more XYZ. But you don't have to do that. It is still your story, and the one thing you have to get over is, while you're typing, thinking what the reader will think of this, because believe me, that is the worst thing that you can think while writing a book. I did that near the beginning, and I just had crippling anxiety about whether these two characters will be perceived as a love interest, whether this character will be unlikable even though they are near and dear to me, whether this magical setting will be perceived as similar to this even though it's not. So put that out of your mind. And what I wanted to say about world building is that you need to think about it on a larger scale, but not necessarily as large as you might think. This might sound slightly motivational, which I did not intend it to be, but make mistakes. Make so many of them, because oftentimes when I just read what I've written, I'm like, where was it going with this? I swear I had a point. This sounds so stupid. I just berate myself all the time when I look back on my writing, but then there are times when I feel like I'm a literary genius. I read a line and I just feel the power and the strength of it, and I know that I hit exactly the chord that I wanted to hit. So writing is a very interesting hobby. It's a very interesting hobby. It must be even more interesting as an actual job. Obviously, I have the luxury of not having deadlines because I feel like that would just decimate my will to write. But we'll see. Eventually, we will see. But the thing that I wanted to close out the video with is I have no routine. I have other things to do. But lately I've been writing quite a bit because I feel that motivation to finish part 1 and because I'm really happy with it and how much I've changed it. So I have that drive to write right now, even though I do have a lot of work. I have nothing to advise you on about timekeeping or organization because I am not the authority. Definitely not the authority based on experience, but when the mood strikes you and you know that you can take the time to do it, just do it. It doesn't matter if you're not really sure how a scene is supposed to pan out because it is going to pan out the way you want it. You might just need to tweak it eventually. And another thing that is definitely advice, cut things out. It hurts your little soul. You can have like a document of scrap paragraphs, maybe even chapters, but cut things out. Cut things out and rewrite because very often a scene just isn't working the way you want it to. That is just advice that me and my mother have had to learn throughout the years, but cutting things out and rewriting is necessary. It isn't enough sometimes to just copy and paste a chapter and edit out 3 lines because it doesn't sound the same. It doesn't flow the way the rest of the chapters do because it was written in an earlier draft. So you need to rewrite things but keep the main plot points, or you need to cut out more than 1 line if an entire paragraph sounds very odd and then just rewrite that. But I think rewriting is a big problem for authors because we feel like everything is a product and labor of our hard work. So it is very difficult to just throw it in the trash, especially if it's a good line, but it just doesn't fit with the vibes anymore. So I think this is kind of it for the video. I'm not really sure what I wanted this to be, but that's a bit of info about my project. I'm probably never going to do a writing routine because I don't have one. I just sit down and write, and the session can be 1 hour long or all day. It has happened before. I have not gotten up for like 10 hours aside from lunch, so not necessarily recommended because your tailbone is going to hurt. But cheers to you, and I will do more book videos and stuff, but I feel like I get more productive when I have a lot of work to do. And I've said this before, but I feel like I'm more creatively productive when I have other things to do. I don't know why. When I have my free time, I feel like I just laze around. But when I have things I have to do, all of a sudden I have 30 episodes to watch and an entire book to read. I am rambling. I'll see you in the next video.